And welcome into Poke the Bear, episode 99, Conor. The great one episode. The Wayne Glensky episode. I am Evan Marinofsky. That is Conor Ryan. Conor, what is up?
Evan, I'm okay. How you doing?
Just okay. Okay.
The vibes are off.
Vibes are off. They're not the same. At least you're not a Warriors fan in Boston right now, because they're getting punched in the face. Going to Mike's Pastry, getting a roundhouse kick to the face. Ooh,
it's rough.
Getting sworn at. Kids are around. There's swearing taking place.
Kids who are definitely not leading the chance to.
Oh no, never.
The kids.
No, not the kids. Spare the kids. I love this. As I tweeted on Thursday, it's the Canucks. The 2011 Vancouver Canucks. That is what they are. But that is aside from the point, because typically, Conor, during this time of year, if you took out recent events and you just had the Celtics in the finals and the Bruins just having their offseason, would kind of be sitting here going like, what are we going to talk about? We're just kind of playing grab ass for a bit, blah, 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 Celtics, and, would maybe get into some offseason preview type stuff. Well, no, actually, there is quite a bit. And this stuff, I don't think is going away. I think we are set on content for quite a bit with this one. We discussed it on Bruins beat, obviously Bruce Cassidy being fired. But now Bruce Cassidy has spoken. And so is Don Sweeney, by the way, because we did Bruins beat the night of. Sweeney spoke the day after. So we have a lot to digest. And I think a lot of things are unclear. I think there's one thing that's very clear. Bruce Cassidy got screwed. I mean, so the timeline of events, I guess, is Bruce Cassidy got told he was coming back. Status quo, you're coming back. You have a year left on your deal. I believe it was $3 million. So he's got a year left. 3 weeks go by. Don Sweeney, what is Don Sweeney text Bruce Cassidy like, hey, you around right now? Can I come over? I wonder if he brought pizza or something. Do you think Sweeney brought some food, maybe some drinks?
Definitely showed up with the muffins from Market Basket. But it was at 3 p.m. He was gonna eat them anyway. It was one of those half measure. I'm not doing anything with this.
Something.
I'll set it here.
Sweeney comes over Cassidy house and fires Cassidy 3 weeks after saying you can stay, and gave him permission to, I guess, fire Kevin Dean and alert him that he would not be returning. So this doesn't look good. This really doesn't look good. What is your reaction to all of this?
Yeah, I think you look at just the way this offseason has gone, and it's been an uphill climb, I think, for over a week now. You look at the hand they were dealt with, the amount of injuries they're dealing with. You still have the uncertainty with Bergeron. You have McAvoy and Marchand out. Going to be tough sledding, right? But those are all things that, all right, you're already in this kind of closing window. Luck isn't on your side. You roll with the punches. What can you do except kind of look back at maybe the moves that Sweeney and Neely did in years past and go, all right, well, this is a situation right now. The way this has been handled now with Bruce Cassidy and what the mixed messaging, the mixed signals, the stop and go, the fact that, as you said, they gave him the green light to let Kevin Dean go and go with the assumption that they're running it back next year, or at the very least, even if it's a new path for this team, with an established coach and Bruce Cassidy in place, to then go right around 3 weeks later and fire him. It's the first time I think Bruins fans look at this and be like, this is a dysfunctional organization in terms of how this is handled. This is, as much as I think Boston sports fans for years have enjoyed dunking on the New York Jets and these other teams that are run by, teams clouded by, short-sighted decisions, by faulty decision-making, by, poor rationale for some monumental shifts in their line of thinking or their 3-5 year plan. You're seeing it now with a team in Boston, a team that, even a few weeks ago was on the cusp of maybe beating the Hurricanes, and who knows how far they would have gone. And even if you asked me at the end of the year what they were going to do, I would have said, yeah, they have some tough decisions to make. We'll see what Bergeron does. I feel like he'd be coming back. Again, I think that's changed now. I don't think it's 60-40 that he's back at this point, but it just shows you how far things have dropped off. And, some of it is, of course, waiting for that domino to fall when you've got this team that only has so many more kicks at the can left. But what about when it's, facilitated and it's brought on by management and a front office staff that seems like they can't make the decision on what they want moving forward, which not only should discourage Bruins fans in terms of, all right, the way they handle Bruce Cassidy, a guy who is, made the most of this flawed roster he's had for years. That's already concerning. Yeah, that's already concerning. And now moving forward, all right, the same dysfunctional front office, this management staff is now the ones that are charting the path moving forward. That should really scare you if you're a Bruins fan, because right now, I don't know if you have any faith in them, and I don't know if you have any set concrete details in terms of what path they are moving forward. It's kind of right now, like, we'll see what happens. And in a summer like this where so much is at stake, you cannot have that. You can't have treading water, dipping your toe in the water and seeing how things work out. You need to commit to whatever path you want to have moving forward.
And if I'm a fan of this team, I have a really tough time spending, $170 on a pair of tickets next year for a game in December against the Winnipeg Jets. Sorry, it's true. I also think another thing this week and by the way, the dysfunctional thing I think is very interesting, because as the Jacobs get a lot of heat, they've always gotten a lot of heat. But one thing the Bruins have not been, at least in the past 15, 20 years, is dysfunctional. Even when they traded Joe Thornton, it was like there was a path. They were going to rebuild quickly. This is the first time they've been actually dysfunctional, because you don't tell a guy one thing and then 3 weeks later revert on it completely and be a functioning organization that is doing well. But what I think scares people a lot is when Don Sweeney spoke on Tuesday, saying that, as you said, there's no direction. Like, they don't know what they're doing. And that's a scary thing. Because again, if he got up there and said, look, we're rebuilding, right? It wouldn't make a lot of sense that he was up there leading the rebuild. But at least there's a path. They're going to do something. What's coming next. I have no idea what's coming next. None. No one does. And I think it all hinges on Bergeron coming back. But that's still not good enough. Because what do you tell a guy like Bergeron? Oh, you come back? Well, we're going to see how things go next year after the injuries. Fluto Shinzawa had said he had multiple sources saying that Bergeron might wait to give a decision until like November or December, which in that case, does anyone want to go through that again? Not particularly. No. So again, this isn't good. This is really bad. Right. And we're not fear mongering here. We're not stoking flames. It's true. There's no direction. They fired their really good coach, which, by the way, as I was thinking yesterday about who do I think they should have replace him? Who would be better? I keep going back to none of these guys are upgrades. Like all the normal suspects, your DeBoers, your Tortorellas, all those regular guys that just kind of they're like used tissues going from place to place to place. None of them are upgrades. None of them. We'll get into who should replace Cassidy later. I think we're kind of just breaking this down now. But the real question is what changed over the 3 weeks? What happened then? And I think there's a few things that could have happened. I think number one, maybe it's something to do with injuries. That could have maybe done it, but I don't think you fire your coach over that.
Yeah.
I also look at, because again, there was a lot of speculation about players. Did players say, hey, we really don't love playing for Cassidy? But Sweeney came out, and I'm going off his word, adamantly said it wasn't the players. On Tuesday, he said that. So you can cross that off the list. I keep going back to Cam Neely, because it seems like there's something with Cam Neely there, because he was the one who was pretty outspoken about there needs to be some changes with Cassidy at his end of season presser. And you also look at the things he said and picking at that. And I'm wondering if there was something from him about this. What do you think happened in those 3 weeks?
Yeah, no, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, Evan, in terms of I feel like it's Neely and it's an overall upper management just wanting a new voice and just not thinking that Cassidy's the right fit, which seems extremely flawed. And I think it's something we talked about when we did our instant reaction on Monday. That when it comes to the Bruins front office and management trying to map out plans or talking points or giving you a lot of stuff, one, they don't really give you a lot of stuff anyway in terms of tangible, concrete stuff. Like, as you said, Don Sweeney wasn't going to walk up on Tuesday morning with the letter that the Rangers had, being like, we're going to rebuild. right?
He pulls out like a whiteboard and everything's charted. I was like, we're gonna do this, this, and then this.
That was never gonna happen. But also then you look at just I think I hinted at it before that listening to them kind of talk about things and talking in circles, it's like when you go to the movies and see like a Michael Bay film where like the script is super shitty, but like at least that you can like follow along from point A to point B. You nod in your head, there's explosions, not when you're like talking to those guys, but you're following along, you're getting the general gist of what they're saying. They're hammering home the same points. You're like, okay, yeah, all right. And then like you leave and you get out of the theater and you sit in your car and you go, wait a second, that didn't make any fucking sense. What are we talking? Like, it's when then, like, yeah, exactly. You walk out and you start applying logic and you're like, this doesn't make any sense. So again, we can go over the narratives, the talking points that they mentioned about, the fact that, did he lose the room? Don Sweeney said that wasn't the case. Bergeron, I think in an interview with Le Journal de, was it Quebec, I think, is pretty much shot that down and said, he doesn't interfere and stuff like that. You look at, systems in place and changing those things. Doesn't seem like that was at the top of the priority in terms of, again, you don't fire a coach like Cassidy and the, resume that he has off of something that can be tweaked, right? Like, it's not like, all right, you're not doing enough low to high play, so you're fired. Like, you can tweak that. Yeah, exactly. And if that was the reasoning, then you're a poorly run, crappy organization.
You're an idiot.
Yeah. So you have that. And then other things like, again, injuries where, it's something that Ty Anderson at 98.5 kind of took Sweeney to task about. Sweeney talks all about injuries and how that impacted them in the Carolina series. Well, how is that then an indictment on the coach if you were injured and you came up just short in Game 7 against a far superior team that outscored you 16-1 in the regular season? If anything, like there should be like a silver. I'm not one to like usually dole out silver linings, but if you're looking for an excuse of what Cassidy got out of that flawed roster last year, focus on the silver linings there for that season. So I think it all comes down to, I think maybe Neely, the guy who, again, Sweeney gave his end of season presser and like, all right, maybe there's some changes on the horizon. Then Neely comes up and we leave that being like, he's like, Cassidy going to get fired? Like,
those were like Michael Bay explosions.
Yeah, those were the Michael Bay explosions. That made no sense. Exactly. The explosions for the sake of doing them. We're like, what was that? Like, that's us leaving the press conference. So it's just a mess in terms of, I don't know if it's Neely looking at just getting a new voice in there, but again, is the new voice just to roll back the same crew, the same roster that is seriously flawed, that's going to be hurt going into the year, that of your own doing you've assembled and Cassidy couldn't get enough out of, and he went probably above and beyond what was expected of him? If that's the case, I don't know what exactly Neely's doing, because whether it's the need to, add toughness to the group, which good job, that's your directive, because it worked so well with Backus and Foligno and Nick Ritchie and Matt Bolesky and all those things. Great input if that's what it is. All these things that have hampered and further closed his contention window instead of maximizing it. If that's where the directive is coming from, if you're a Bruins fan, you should be scared. We talked about not fear mongering. You should be scared shitless, because that is an indictment on this. Yeah, that's an indictment on this franchise, if that's what the call is moving forward.
I keep wondering, like, if Cam Neely did get fired, right? If he got let go, who would hire him? I don't mean to be like, I don't mean to be mean, but like, would another team pick him up? I don't think so. So again, I and another reason why I think it's a little bit of Cam Neely, if you listen to, and obviously you listen, I'm not saying you, I'm saying listeners. If you go back and watch the Sweeney press conference, it's very weird. And there's an interesting thing where there are a lot of times where he defends Cassidy, which in most cases, when you're trying to like show that you made the right decision, you're not going to like lay the guy out to dry, but you'll kind of hint at some things. There was none of that. He shot down a million different things about, they lost the room. No, he didn't lose the room. No. Bruce did a terrific job, all this stuff, which makes me think it wasn't his decision. Ultimately, I don't think it was. Again, I'm just going off like tone and things like that. So that's not the most reliable thing. But I do think that is another reason why I do think it was Neely, because I do kind of think Sweeney came out there and probably that's why he went to Cassidy's house. I don't know if that has any correlation to it, but there's a part of me that just thinks it's Neely. And I think a lot of it comes back to just the tone of Sweeney being like, defending Cassidy. I think he liked Cassidy. Cassidy even said that communication with Don was fine. I believe he said that on Thursday. So again, just a weird situation. Like, again, it doesn't seem like the communication's good. It seems like it's very off.
Yeah.
And I also don't think it's ownership. I don't think it's ownership because frankly, I don't think they care. But I also think a lot of it is they made the playoffs every year. That's been their thing. Do you make the playoffs? That was the only reason why there was change in the mid 2010s was because they didn't make the playoffs. Well, they've made the playoffs every year. Cassidy's gotten them to out of the first round most of those years.
Yeah, 4 of 6.
4 of 6. And the first one was like, he saved them.
Happy to be there.
Yeah, like that was just like luck that and there was a lot to do with him. So there's one reason that Bruce Cassidy seems like the one reason he got fired was because he was not relating to younger players well enough, that younger players were not developing under him and doing as well as they could have been under him. And that's kind of weird because if I look through all these guys, and I'm not the first one to do it because a lot of people have done it this week, there's been a lot of young players that have come in here. Not many have been very good to begin with.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, Evan. Yeah, and again,
weird who that falls on.
And also it's one of those things too, where you look at the talking points from Neely's presser. You know, the thing that kind of tips you off is when he like pretty much just gave the shoulder shrug about Cassidy moving forward, but also he talks about the flaws and, you know, things need to be corrected. And one of them was not giving these younger guys enough rope. And I think Neely even said, like, when I was a younger player, I needed more time to develop. That's true. Kim Neely also showed a lot more than a Jack Sednica or a Trent Frederick or anyone like that. Like, there's a clear difference. I don't think Jay Leach, for example, is coming in here and Jack Sednica is going to be a 70-point guy. I don't know. Maybe, and you know what? I'll gladly be dunked on. You guys can all dunk on me if that's what happens. I don't think that's the case. And again,
he was supposed to win the Calder a few years ago.
Exactly. That was, I think, reported that he was like the favorite to win the Calder. It didn't happen, right? So, I mean, you look at that, and if that's one of the reasons, and it's probably the only concrete like talking point they can point to, instead of being like, we need a new voice because we're going to run it back with a lesser coach, which is not great. This one, again, you don't have a lot of foundation to build off of in terms of the need to incorporate more young talent. Because again, I think it's more of an indictment on the prospect pool you have than it is Cassidy not getting the most out of these guys. And it's something that we've talked about before where, all right, you go into 2022-23 with Cassidy in place, which is what they told him was going to be the situation.
Yes.
And let's say it's Fabian Lysell makes the team out of camp. And as a younger player who's still a teenager who weighs 160 pounds soaking wet.
Yeah.
Probably going to have some struggles. It happens, right? Like, so if he has a bad game or he gets out muscled, isn't getting to the grade A ice or, you know, misses an assignment and gives up, you know, on the ice for a goal against, if Cassidy buries him for 5 games, all right, you got to get the message across. Like, you can't do that. This is a guy that has the talent. You need to see what you have in him and encourage him along because his team isn't a cup contender. This is what you roll with as the police run by, because I think they listen to our podcast. I don't know if you can
can't hear it. I cannot hear the sirens.
There's cops right outside my place.
Anyway, going to protect the Warriors fans.
Exactly. Yes, that is true. But
they're going to arrest Cassidy for dealing with younger players in a bad sense.
Exactly.
He was running like Guantanamo Bay in the Bruins locker room with like the younger players.
Apparently it's a bad hit, Evan. So, I mean, you look at that and you look at like a Lysell situation. If he's sitting him for five plus games, that can't happen. But all right, you're looking at it last year with guys like Sednica and Frederick. Are those guys that were moving the needle, that were showing enough stuff? Like, even look at Sednica at the end of the season when they were kind of cruising into the final week of the regular season. They gave him a 2C job, and he had the only play I remember him doing was a lazy ass clear that was recovered and led to a goal against from the Bruins. Like, and then he barely played. What are you supposed to do? Like, in that situation? So you look at that, you look at the fact they haven't drafted enough talent, that they've given up tons of talent in terms of trying to max out this contention window, which is a casualty of trying to go for it. Like, again, you're trying to win now, so I get that. But whether it be situations with the guys you have in place here, or also just the timing of it, like, all right, you want them to play Sednica more, you want them to play Frederick more, then why the hell did you spend like $20 million to get guys like Foligno and Nosek and all these other guys? Correct. If you're then going to go around and have it be the main argument of letting go of Cassidy was that he wasn't giving these guys enough chance. Like, last year was the perfect chance to give a guy like Sednica some run. And you signed all this free money you had on veteran guys. Like, again, Michael Bay movie. It makes no sense, Evan. You would take any logic.
And they've handcuffed themselves for this offseason.
Yes.
That's the best part. Like, that is another part of it where, like, you've screwed yourself. And, like, I'll read this. Like, NHL Watcher on Twitter transcribes some Elliot Friedman, Jeff Merrick podcast, I believe, where Friedman says, you know, who's a guy I think who's on the Bruins radar? Vinny Trocheck. And then Marek replies, see, I was going to say Nazem Kadri. And Friedman says, well, there's another one. So they are not rebuilding. I don't think they're rebuilding. And again, you go off ownership's history, where they're at currently, like they aren't rebuilding. And by the way, we'll get into what I think we'll probably do an episode coming up where we explain what the Bruins should do. My plan is not that. My plan is very different. I think you know my plan. And I hate my plan, by the way. I hate it. But I think you will contend for a cup quicker. But they're not going to do that. They're going to try to run it back. They're going to go out and somehow do cap gymnastics to sign Vinny Trocheck or Nazem Kadri. And Kadri kind of makes some sense, but I just don't know what the direction of the team is. That's the frustrating part is like, again, is Kadri coming in and being your number one center? I don't know. Newsflash, guys, you know how good that 2023 NHL draft is going to be with all those centers? I mean, come on. So again, going back to Cassidy with the younger players, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And again, if you are going to try and run it back, does Rick Tocchet put you in a better position to do that? Going off what we know, he does not. Does Peter DeBoer? Does Tortorella? Does any of those guys who are experienced NHL coaches? Now, if you want to get into like Nate Lehman and David Quinn and Greg Carvel or whatever, like that could be different. Maybe that's more of a rebuild. I can tell you Lehman and Carvel probably, I can basically tell you Carvel's not. Lehman probably won't be either. Hate to burst the bubble there. But, you know, I mean, again, the direction, it goes back to that. There's no direction. And, you know, if you're trying to run it back, why the hell would you pick anybody other than Cassidy? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Especially if you're trying to retool on the fly and get guys like Kadri. Like Cassidy's the guy you have to max out this current window you have here. So again, if you go into it and Bergeron's not back and you're just signing guys and plugging in holes and trying to tread water, you're just delaying the inevitable. Like, you know, it's not worth it in that case in terms of what's the best step moving forward. All you're going to do is have Bruins fans go into the season discouraged because they probably know they're not cup contenders. Like you don't know what you're going to get from Marchand. You have guys that are injured that you're relying on them to kind of give you a second half surge to then get smoked by the Rangers, a team that actually committed to a rebuild. Like, you know, those are situations where, all right. And then you delay the inevitable, you get like the 19th overall pick in 2023. You then take another step back in 2024, and then you finally tank in 2025 off your own doing when you should have done it earlier. And what's 2025? Like the year that they actually tank, and it's not even tank, it's the fact that they're so poorly constructed, they finally bottom out, will be a year where they finally get the first overall pick. And it's like Nico Hischier. Like that's a thing. Like that's what they'll do.
Yakupov.
Like, yeah, exactly. Like that's like the risk you run. Like it's mapped out, right? Like, and again, who knows what happens over the span of a season? Prospects, you know, rise and fall. You have like that guy this year, Brad Lambert from, I think he's Swedish, even though his name is Brad Lambert, or he's like Finnish or something like that. But
Adam Lambert.
Yeah, exactly. Like he literally was supposed to be like a top 5 pick, and now he's like 19, 20. So things can change, but you look at 2023, whether it's Bedard, whether Adam Fantilli, Matvei Mishkov, all these guys, they all look legit. Like obviously Bedard is Bedard, but you've got any top 5 pick, you have an impact player you can add to a core.
Even top
commit to
10
it now
is pretty good. Even top 10 is pretty good.
Commit to it now and try to get something. And that, even if that means moving a guy like Hall this offseason and trying to get a top 15 pick this year and start that by adding some piece to the puzzle. Like, again, it's right now you're just delaying the inevitable. I think if you're trying to retool on the fly with this core in place and try to tweak here and there with a lesser coach in place, like even Barry Trotz, who's like, is the guy they map out as like of this available crew other than Bruce Cassidy is the most qualified and will have the most guys going after him. If you had an issue, especially if your ownership with Bruce Cassidy and the fact that you weren't getting enough 5-on-5 offense, hate to tell you what you're going to get with Barry Trotz, because it ain't fun. It works, but it ain't fun.
It's very boring hockey.
Yes. So it's at this point, just rip off the Band-Aid. Like, what are we doing? And again, Don Sweeney's not the guy to just come out and declare they're rebuilding, but if we get to the middle of July and free agency opens and they're hot after a guy like Kadri, it's just a waste of everyone's time. And if you're a Bruins fan, I don't know how you get any excited about going into a year where it's just going to be treading water and trying to spark a run when it should be building for the future. I think if Bruins fans went into this year expecting it to be pretty rough, but there's light at the end of the tunnel in terms of a draft pick and you've traded other guys for more assets, there's a means to an end there. If you're just running it back with this veteran core in place, you're wasting everyone's time.
Wasting everyone's time is an understatement, I think. Because again, I mean, if they go out and they sign Kadri to a long-term deal or Trocheck, it's just like, what are you doing? It was the same idea with Derek Forbort when they signed him to a like quote unquote long-term deal for him, and we're like, oh, he's going to evolve into a top pairing left shot defenseman for McAvoy, and it's like you can't expect that. It's the same with Trocheck. You know, he's going to be our future number one center. It's like, no, he isn't actually at all. So again, a lot of bad things have been happening over the past, maybe there's like a spell on the Bruins or something, you know, like there's something happened where there is just bad luck hitting them. But out of all of this stuff that's happened over the past week, what then came to the forefront again was, you know, who's going to be a free agent next offseason? David Pastrnak and the future of David Pastrnak. So lots of different things. Fluto had a source close to Pastrnak say something like, he won't come back if Sweeney's the GM because he's mad about how he handled the Krejci and the Krug contract stuff. Then you had the agent come out and say everything's fine. We're going to meet in July and sing Kumbaya or something. I don't know. Anyways, now it's come to the forefront of should they trade David Pastrnak or not? And you wrote a column saying that shouldn't be entertained at this point. But I think there's a lot of scenarios with Pastrnak. I don't think, again, it depends the route they're taking. And if they are going to go for it, if they're just going to keep running it back, I think that's what they're going to tell Pastrnak. They're going to say, we're going to be competitive over your term. And he's shown no signs of wanting to leave. I don't think David Pastrnak is like dying to get out of here. But why shouldn't people fret about David Pastrnak yet?
Well, I think it all is going to hinge on just the striking that conversation with him. And as you said, I don't think there's been any indication yet that he's disgruntled or looking to get out of here, or, you know, there's the risk of a guy like him being very intrigued by what the payout's going to be if he hits the open market in 2023. But Pastrnak is also the same guy who signed that first contract extension that was way below his value and said the first thing he bought was, I think, was Sarku Japan at the mall. You know, there's a guy who said he doesn't play, hockey for the money, which again, he is going to get paid and he's going to get paid accordingly. He's no longer going to be a bargain contract, but
he's going to get as many Sarkus as he wants.
He could own 10 Sarku Japans. 10 Sarkus. Yeah, exactly. With one paycheck. I think it's one of those things though, where I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that if he wants to stay here and be part of this core, I think he enjoys this market, enjoys this city. And I think he's also a guy that has really relished the opportunity to kind of build his standing up as more of a leader. You know, he's won the AA a lot more this year. He enjoys, that part of it as well, being kind of more of a authority in the room. I wouldn't be surprised if he's committed to staying here, if he signs 8 years at $9 million, like 8.5, maybe, like if that'd be below what his payout would be, but it would not surprise me if that's what it is. It's all just going to come down to, I think, for him, just getting that conversation started and mapping out what the best step is moving forward and pitching him on what the future is. And again, I think what the Bruins need to do though, is it can't be, hey, we're just going to try to be competitive and we'll be a fringe playoff team every year. It has to be, listen, we might have to, dismantle some of this core for the next year or two. But if in a couple of years, if it's you, McAvoy, Swayman, Lindholm, a Bedard or someone like that, with also a bunch of now open up cap space and a team that's still committed to winning and kind of absolving this shit show of an offseason, I think you can pitch that to him. I don't think he's a guy that needs to, you have to map out like a 4-hour PowerPoint presentation in terms of what's the best route for him. I think he wants to stay here. It's all about just making sure that he's not going to be wasting his time here and spending his age 27 to 33, 34 prime on a team that is just rudderless. So I think that's the biggest thing for him. And it's totally reasonable. I don't think there's any smoke or any warning signs that he's disgruntled or wants out. So it's all going to come down to how this conversation goes. But amid an off season that has a lot that's gone wrong, I don't think it's something where they're bracing him to just, walk into the meeting, throw the double birds up, and then you have to deal with that. And again, if it gets to it, it's all going to, I think, come down to just Pastrnak explicitly stating that he just want to be part of a rebuild, which again, Sure, you can trade him and get probably a good jumping off point, whether it's, I don't know, New Jersey's second overall pick, a guy like Mercer, someone like that. Like, it helps, but the Bruins don't want to do that. They want to keep him as part of this next core. But if it comes to that, what do you know? It's of your own doing of making a rudderless team with a guy in Pasa who loves his market, who can just see the writing on the wall that it's just not worth sticking through a team that has no future moving forward.
Oh, it's their fault. It's their doing. It's not like it's Pasternak's fault. It isn't his. But again, I think if you're right in the sense that I think how they even if they are going to rebuild for a year or two, they should pitch him on like, we expect you to be a leader. Like, you have a chance here to like be the next generation. You get to be the next like Bergeron in the sense of a leader, a young leader in the room type thing. But if he doesn't, if he comes into the meeting and says, guys, I don't want to be part of a rebuild. I want to be a contender. I want to be on a really good team with better ownership and better front office. Got to trade him. Can't let him walk for nothing, because a lot of guys have walked out of here for nothing a lot over the past bunch of years. And it's all been different situations. It's not like it's all cut and dry. Like Chara's was very different than Tuukka Rask's, and Tuukka Rask's was different from Krejci. Like, again, the issue is the succession plan. It was never like, oh, they walked for nothing. It was more like, you had nothing in place. Goaltending a little bit more, obviously, than you did with Chara and Krejci. Because, again, if Pastrnak walks for nothing, you've known about this for a while. So, again, I think, if he explicitly says, I don't want to be part of a rebuild, and the Bruins are set on doing a rebuild, which, by the way, I don't think will happen. Yeah. But if it does, I mean, he gets you a first, maybe 2 firsts, maybe a first top prospect, current, young NHL player, kind of spearheads the new rebuild, which I don't love. I don't think that's good. And I don't think that's what's going to end up happening. But again, if he comes in, I don't want this to be like Evans says they have to trade Pastrnak. I'm saying if he walks in and says, I don't want to be part of a rebuild, and the Bruins say they are doing a rebuild, that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that he should be traded. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if that is the case, then you have to. You can't just be like, oh, cool, we're going to play out the season with you. We'll revisit you in a few months and then let him walk for nothing. You can't do that. So again, a lot of big things. These are huge decisions, and I don't think anyone is confident in the front office to make them. I will pose this as well, right? If Cam Neely's calling the shots up there, and I know him and Sweeney are friends, so it's I don't think this is going to happen. Do you think there's any chance that they walk back on Sweeney's extension too? With all the blowback they've gotten, they are conscious to this stuff. Do you think there's any chance that they say, you know what, Don, we're actually not going to do the extension? You're good.
Well, Evan, they have not announced his contract yet. So until
that's what I mean. That's what I mean.
Coming out,
I was afraid. I haven't looked at my phone in 10 minutes. I was afraid you're about to bring that up. Like, you got it.
But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a legitimate thing that they can consider. Because again, you look at, I think for Bruins fans, it's one thing, the first wave of like, why are you firing Cassidy? Like, why is he the scapegoat? All these things. And now I think the second wave I think people are realizing now, especially when you get like what Cassidy talked about of just, kind of getting the rug pulled out from under him. If you're a Bruins fan, you have to be horrified of what the future holds, because it doesn't seem like there's any plan in place. So if you're like
in the office, again, we're all pointing the finger guns at each other.
Exactly. And if you're a season ticket holder, how much incentive do you have of committing to this team when they're kind of like, well, we'll see what happens. Well, all right. Well, I shelled out a couple G's to commit to this team. Why am I doing this as well? Like, that's where I think you just look at the fact that it doesn't seem like there's a plan in place going forward. That's where I think management and ownership has to be like, all right, what are we actually doing? Because right now, if we're just treading water, we're going nowhere.
Oh, 100%. Again, if I'm a season ticket holder, I am very much. And by the way, I think if they were rebuilding, no one would care. Like, not no one would care, but no one would be like, oh, I'm canceling my tickets. Like, it's like, oh, it's going to be a bad couple of years, but it'll be worth it. This is an investment in a sense. But again, what are you investing in right now? What is the reason to go spend money and watch this team other than, you need to drink to watch this team next year or to at least survive this off season. Anyways, Conor, what can the people look forward to from you over at BSJ?
Yep, Evan, we'll have continued coverage throughout this so far dreadful off season in terms of what next steps are, potential coaching candidates, where Bruce Cassidy might end up, all that stuff. Plenty of stuff on the horizon in terms of free agency trades. All that stuff will be over at BSJ. So please subscribe at bostonsportsjournal.com. Want to follow me on Twitter? You can do that at ConorRyan_93.
Go do all that. I'm Evan Marinofsky. That's Conor Ryan. You Poke the Bear listeners. Have a great rest of your day.